Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. Today we're going to be talking about the biggest changes coming to patch 9.17 that's already on the PBE server, and a few things that aren't there just yet, but Riot has announced. So with all that being said and done, if you end up enjoying today's video, then don't forget to hit that like button, but let's not waste any more time, and let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we'll be talking about are the three major reworks hopefully coming out in the next patch. The first thing is going to be, of course, the Aurelion Soul. He is getting some pretty significant changes, so let's go over it very quickly. Starting with his passive, the damage has been changed from being 20 to 130 to now starting only at 16 and only going up to 120. And on top of that, the AP ratio has been changed to 25% flat as opposed to starting at 18 and going up to 35 based on level. So all in all, it should be a little bit stronger in the mid game, probably a tiny bit weaker early and a tiny bit weaker in the late game, which I think Riot is trying to force people to take action with him in the mid game. Moving along, we also have his Q ability, where the cooldown has been changed to essentially being almost always lower cooldown than at the very moment, at rank 3 and above. The movement speed has also been changed to be increased by 10%, so it's now 20. And if Aurelion's Soul is faster than his Q, so his move speed is faster than the travel speed of his Q, the missile speed of the Q ability itself will actually go up and speed up to keep up with Aurelion. And this is actually pretty cool because this can make Aurelion make some really big Qs now, and he can make some crazy initiations with that. Next up, his W, which has probably the biggest change, is the fact that now it actually has a 3-second timer as to how long you can expand the stars for. The speed of the stars rotating after you activate W is also now decaying speed as well, but after 3 seconds or upon deactivating it, the stars will retract, you'll get 40% movement speed, and it'll decay over 1.5 seconds. So you can combine that with your Q ability for some pretty cool stuff. Next up is E ability. The passive movement speed has actually been removed to not overload him with just way too much movement speed, of course. The range has been increased, the cooldown has been changed, so now it's actually longer at the earlier ranks, and the speed itself, the base speed, has been increased as you rank it up. All in all, some pretty cool changes coming to Aurelion Soul, probably focusing him more around the mid game and a little bit more to look for those actual windows to trade as opposed to just having his W on late game and always having it on. On top of this, I also feel like his roaming potential will actually be better. Next up, we also have the rework coming over to Garen, which I do have a full gameplay of. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend you do so, but let's go over it very quickly. So his attack speed per level has been increased very slightly. His passive no longer doubles below 25 and 50% health. The cooldown has been changed to now being 6 at all ranks rather than 9 and then 4. And the healing has actually been changed to just being overall better. It heals for more later on into the game, and it actually scales per level as opposed to being either 2% or later on in the game being a flat 8%. His W now overall is slightly worse because you can see the resist per stack has been lowered, the resist cap has been lowered, and the minions kills to max stacks has also been increased. So overall, a nerf to the W. But his E ability is where things get very interesting. So first of all, the spin and the amount of damage you do with it, or at least the amount of ticks that you do with the spin, has been changed to scale with attack speed as opposed to level. So that in itself already opens up a ton of new options for builds. Moving along, however, the base damage has been changed to being lower at the earlier ranks, but actually higher as you get it to rank 5 and 4. The AD ratio has also been changed in this ability to being a little bit less at the earlier ranks as well. The hits needed to shred the armor has been slightly increased, but that's perfectly fine since you can now get attack speed and make that hit much faster regardless. No longer does it deal 33% bonus damage if you're only hitting one enemy, but now, and this is probably one of the biggest changes as well, it deals 25% bonus damage and applies on hit effects at 50% of the damage to the nearest enemy. So again, opening up some seriously interesting builds like Blade of the Rune King. You can go for things like Time Man, which does proc on every single E, and the list just goes on. And last but not least, his ultimate, the Villainy passive, is gone. It now permanently deals true damage as opposed to magical damage to everyone but the villain, and the damage, the numbers themselves, have overall been lowered by just a bit, obviously because it's now true damage to every single champion. So those are some pretty massive Garen changes. Let me know what you think about them down below. Personally, I actually think they're quite good because if you're a Garen player, this makes you have so many more options with what you can do, how you can play him, how you can build him, which is fantastic. He's no longer as linear as he currently is. And the final actual rework happening this patch, or at least hopefully this patch and it's coming out, is of course going to be to Kale, which we did talk about before, but let's go over it very quickly. Starting off with the armor increase being increased from 26 to 29, moving on to her passive Divine Ascent. You can see here that at level 1, the movement speed has been changed to now being at 8% in all directions as opposed to 15% but only towards champions. You can now stack the passive when you're attacking towers, which is actually really big. The range form is now at rank 1 evolve, and the AoE form is now at rank 2 evolve. The level 6 form is now ranged, and that's one of the biggest changes to this champion because now it actually makes her a real champion a lot earlier into the game, and you don't have to just wait till level 11 to actually start doing something useful. However, the range has been slightly lowered as to not make her too overpowered. And on top of that, the attack speed per stack on this form has also been slightly lowered, again, not to make her way too strong just at level 6. And by the time you get to level 16, you no longer have the true damage, but you get extra range on your auto attacks now being plus 50, so you'll be at 575, which is actually quite good. Moving on to Kale's Q ability, it now refunds 50% of the mana cost if it hits a champion, so it's a lot better at trading in the laning phase. The cast delay has been lowered. The cast time has also been changed from the auto attack timer to being a 0.25 flat, which is, I think, overall a little bit better early. The missile speed has been slightly decreased as well, so it's a little bit more difficult to land. The range has been lowered by 50, the shred has been lowered by 5%, but the shred duration has been lowered by a full second. So all in all, because you can spam it more often because of the refund, they made it a little bit weaker overall, so you can't just abuse it too hard. But regardless, I think it's still overall a good thing for Kale. Next up, we have her E ability, where you can see here the execute damage has been changed to now. First of all, it actually scales better, but it doesn't scale up in its actual percent as high. So in other words, the base damage of this ability is overall a little bit less, but as you get AP and items, it'll actually start scaling and doing more overall. And the final part of Kale is of course going to be her ultimate, where the mana cost has been lowered and the AoE radius of it has been increased. So a pretty good buff to Kale's ultimate for sure, because at rank 3, it costs 0 mana. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is going to be a list of buffs, nerfs, and changes that Riot has posted on Twitter. Now, these changes and nerfs and all that stuff aren't on the PBE server just yet, so they hopefully will be relatively soon. I'll actually make a comment in the video description below or in the comment section itself to link it if they ever post the changes, so you guys can check them out if you want. But let's take a look at what they're planning to buff and nerf. So let's talk about the nerfs first. Aatrox, Akali, and Qiyana. Now, these are pretty much, I would say, expected to be nerfed, right? Qiyana in laning phase, extremely strong, especially in LCS as well. Akali, of course, I mean, still getting the nerf hammer regardless. I mean, I almost feel bad for the champion. And then you have Aatrox as well, which I'm a little bit surprised about. I mean, he's a good champion, but is he really in nerf territory? That's a little bit questionable. Moving along to the actual buffs though, we have buffs coming over to Galio. Don't forget that Riot did buff Galio not too long ago, which I did play against on the PBE, and his damage actually felt quite good, but they're buffing him once again, so this one might actually make Galio pretty strong in the next patch. Moving along, we also have some buffs coming over to Ryze. Now, Ryze, of course, is a champion that is feeling a little bit weak, surprisingly enough, even though his EQ ability is really strong, but apparently they want to make him more into the meta. We have Kindred buffs coming in, and of course, people are going to be very questionable about this, but Yasuo buffs coming in the next patch. Let me know what you think about that down below. I'll also link the buffs once they come to the PBE server in the comment section in case you're curious. Moving along, we also have some buffs coming over to Kalista and AD carry that pretty much nobody plays, so I feel like definitely needing some buffs without question, though you have to be very careful with how you buff her. We have buffs coming over to Lucian, which is very surprising because he seems like he's actually pretty good spot. I've seen a lot of Lucians pop off. We have buffs coming over to Zyra, which is a champion I don't see unless they're one tricks, so I'm not too surprised there. Buffs to Leona, and then even further buffs coming over to Pantheon jungle. Now, Pantheon, of course, came out this patch feeling a little bit underwhelming, top lane especially and mid lane. He got hotfix buffed in the jungle actually, and he actually started feeling pretty okay specifically in that role, but it feels like Riot is not done there just yet, and they're buffing him even further in the next patch. So those are the major changes coming over to the patch in the next cycle for Summoner's Rift. Now, before we end there, of course, there are some new skins coming out. We have Elderwood Ahri, Elderwood Nocturne, Elderwood Veigar, which are all pretty cool looking, especially the Ahri one. We have Infernal Galio, Infernal Shen, and Infernal Varus. So a lot of skins ready to come out by Riot Games, which I have to say is pretty impressive at how often they're releasing skins. And before we end off the video, a very quick touch on TFT changes. We have a mini rework coming over to the Assassin class, where now at 3 and 6 units, you can have 75% and 150% respectively critical strike damage, and a 10% and plus 25% respectively critical strike chance increase as well. So a pretty massive change coming over to Assassins in TFT. You have Nobles as well, where the heal has been lowered by 5, and we have a bunch of changes coming over to items such as we have Grievous Wounds. 100% healing reduction has now been changed to 80%. Morale Nomicon before, or at least right now, it's 20% over 10 seconds. That's been changed to 60% over 45 seconds. Red buff has also been changed to where it's 20% over 10 seconds to now being 60% over 45. Bloodthirster has been changed by 10% 50% lower of the damage you're healing. Hextech Gunblade now heals for only 25% rather than 33%. Swain got a nerf where his heal per tick, so especially by the time you get a 3-star Swain, is now 30 less heal per tick. And like I said before, the noble heal has been changed as well to being nerfed. But that's about it for this video, guys. There you have it, a bunch of changes already coming into the next patch on the PvE server. Let me know what you think about this video and the information and everything down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed, of course, don't forget to hit that like button. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.